My name is Emory Williams, 38 years old, and last week I became the youngest four-star general in recent U.S. military history. Not that my family would care. They erased my name from my sister Allison's wedding invitation list after what happened 2 years ago. "You're a disgrace to this family," my mother had said on national television when I lost my rank during that scandal. I wasn't welcome at the wedding, but I showed up anyway, in full dress uniform. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand tall when your family tried to bring you down. I grew up in Sterling, Virginia, surrounded by military tradition and impossible expectations. Our family home was like a museum of military achievements, showcasing generations of Williams men who had served with distinction. My father, Colonel James Williams, was a decorated Desert Storm veteran who measured success in medals and promotions. He wore his uniform-like armor, his posture never relaxing even at the dinner table. My mother Diane came from old East Coast money, with political connections stretching from Boston to D.C. She approached family life like a political campaign, obsessively managing our public image and social standing. Every achievement was ammunition for cocktail party conversations, every failure carefully concealed. Then there was my sister Allison, 4 years younger and infinitely more valued. She was the golden child who effortlessly collected perfect report cards, pageant crowns, and our father's rare smiles of approval. I still remember my 12th birthday, when I proudly presented my report card with mostly A's and 1 B+ in English. What happened here? My father tapped the B+ with his index finger, completely ignoring the other grades. "I worked really hard on that essay, Dad. The teacher said my analysis was excellent, but I had some grammar issues," I explained, hope deflating. "Williams men don't make excuses, Emory. They excel, period." He handed back the card without another word. That same evening, Allison bounded in with her elementary report card, straight as usual. Dad swept her into a hug, announcing we would go out for ice cream to celebrate her achievement. My birthday dinner was postponed without mention. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandfather Walter, a retired general who had served in Korea and Vietnam. While my parents attended to Allison's dance recitals, Grandpa Walter taught me chess in our basement, explaining military strategy and the importance of integrity with each move. "The board can change in an instant, Emory," he would say, his weathered hands moving pieces with deliberate care. "But your character is what matters when everything else falls apart." Those quiet afternoons with my grandfather were islands of acceptance in my childhood. He never pressured me about grades or questioned my abilities. Instead, he shared stories from his deployments, emphasizing the men he'd served with rather than the medals he'd earned. High school brought new challenges as I struggled with undiagnosed dyslexia. My parents refused to acknowledge my learning difficulties, calling my slower reading speed laziness and my reversed letters carelessness. I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning, rewriting assignments until the words stopped swimming on the page. When it came time for college applications, there was never a question about my path. 4 generations of Williams men had attended West Point, and I would be the 5th. My own interest in engineering was dismissed without discussion. "The academy will make a man of you," my father declared, as if I were raw material needing correction rather than a son seeking direction. I graduated from West Point in the top third of my class, no small achievement given my undiagnosed dyslexia and lack of family support. At the graduation ceremony, my father offered what passed for congratulations in our household. "You barely made it, but you made it. Now, the real work begins." My first deployment to Afghanistan tested everything I'd learned about leadership and courage. I led my platoon through a 3-day firefight to secure a strategic village, earning a Bronze Star for valor. When I showed my father the citation, he merely nodded. "Routine performance of duty in combat conditions. Your grandfather had 3 by your age." That deployment revealed the growing divide between my father's military philosophy and my own. Colonel Williams believed in rigid hierarchy, unquestioning obedience, and tradition above all. I discovered that I could earn my soldiers' respect by listening to their input, acknowledging their expertise, and leading from the front rather than the rear. Meanwhile, my mother had perfected the art of social climbing through military connections. She hosted dinner parties for generals' wives, volunteered for high-profile military charities, and strategically mentioned my deployments when useful for sympathy or admiration. When I was home on leave, she paraded me in uniform at her social functions like a trophy. Allison gradually drifted into elite Washington circles as she finished college and began working for a senator. Our childhood bond faded as she absorbed our parents' values and expectations. Our conversations became surface-level exchanges about weather and work, carefully avoiding anything meaningful. Despite my family's minimization of my achievements, my superior officers recognized my potential. I earned commendations for innovative tactical approaches and for bringing my entire unit home safely from dangerous operations. Promotions came steadily, though never fast enough for my father. The dinner celebrating my promotion to captain became another exercise in familial disappointment. The congratulations had barely been offered before my father asked, "So what's your timeline for making major?" Johnson's son made it in 4 years. Only Grandpa Walter truly celebrated with me. The day after my promotion, he invited me to his small apartment near the base. From a worn leather case, he produced his service revolver, a rare Colt, .45, carried through 2 wars. "This is for you, Emery," he said, placing it carefully in my hands. "Your father thinks leadership comes from these." He pointed to the captain's bars on my uniform. "But real leadership comes from this." He touched his hand to my heart. Never forget the difference. I carried that revolver, and that lesson, through each subsequent deployment and promotion, a reminder that leadership was about people, not power. It would be years before I fully understood how important that distinction would become. By age 35, I had achieved the rank of colonel, having been fast-tracked through promotions due to combat leadership and strategic innovation. My assignment to Joint Special Operations Command placed me at the intersection of military operations and policy decisions, a position with significant responsibility and visibility. In early 2021, I was deployed to oversee operations in Karanistan, a fictional name we used for a real country experiencing civil unrest and humanitarian crisis. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, with insurgent forces gaining control of key infrastructure and threatening civilian populations. One rainy Tuesday in March, intelligence reports indicated that insurgent leadership had established a command center in the northern wing of Central Hospital in the capital city. Satellite imagery confirmed unusual activity, and communications intercepts suggested an imminent offensive against government facilities. The order came down from command: authorize a precision strike on the northern wing to eliminate the insurgent leadership and prevent the planned attack. The intelligence brief claimed the wing had been evacuated of patients and was solely occupied by combatants. Something didn't feel right. The timeline between alleged evacuation and insurgent occupation was too tight. I requested additional confirmation of civilian clearance and was told, "Intelligence is verified. Proceed with authorization." Instead, I deployed a small team of operators with thermal imaging equipment to the site. Their report confirmed my fears. The hospital wing still housed at least 30 civilians, including medical staff and patients. The insurgent presence was real, but they had essentially taken these people hostage. I immediately scrubbed the strike and developed an alternative approach. Using a combination of cyber operations to disrupt communications and a precision team of operators, we successfully extracted the insurgent leaders while protecting the civilians. The operation took 16 additional hours but resulted in 0 civilian casualties and the capture of 3 high-value targets. The initial response from command was positive. My decisive action saved lives while accomplishing the mission objective. General Patterson personally called to commend the operation as exemplary judgment in complex conditions. Then the political winds shifted. Senator Howard Blackwell, a close friend of my father and member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, began questioning my judgment in a closed session. Why had I delayed? Why had I disregarded initial intelligence? Was I suggesting that our intelligence services were incompetent? The narrative transformed with alarming speed. Media reports shifted from praising Hero Colonel's precision operation to questioning insubordinate officer DeLay's critical strike. Pentagon sources began leaking concerns about my hesitation, under pressure, and undermining command structure. The culmination came with a televised congressional hearing where I was called to testify about my decision-making process. Under intense questioning, I maintained that protecting civilian lives while accomplishing mission objectives represented the highest ideals of military service. "Would you make the same decision again, Colonel Williams?" Senator Blackwell asked, his tone suggesting the correct answer was no. "Without hesitation, Senator," I replied. "We accomplished our objective without civilian casualties. That is the standard to which we should hold ourselves." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The next morning, my mother appeared on National Morning America when asked about the hearing. Her response cut deeper than any enemy fire I'd ever faced. "You're a disgrace to this family," she declared, her perfect makeup not hiding her disgust. "The Williams men have served with distinction for generations. We do not question orders." My father refused to take my calls. Messages went unreturned. Finally, his aide, Major Thompson, called to deliver a message. "Colonel Williams Sr. requests that you stop using the family name in your statements. He feels it reflects poorly on his service record." The Pentagon's political machinery moved swiftly. I was temporarily demoted to lieutenant colonel pending a full investigation, removed from operational command, and reassigned to a logistics division in Arlington. My security clearance was restricted, effectively sidelining me from meaningful contribution to ongoing operations. My sister Allison called a week after the hearing, her voice distant and formal. "Mom and Dad think it's best if you keep distance for a while. Emery. This whole situation has been very difficult for them, socially and professionally." "And what do you think, Allie?" I asked, using her childhood nickname. After a pause, she replied, "I think families should support each other, but you've made that very difficult." She hung up without saying goodbye. The isolation extended beyond family. Former colleagues avoided me in Pentagon hallways, lunch invitations disappeared, and social media connections quietly unfriended me. Military careers are fragile things, and association with career suicide can be contagious. Only Captain Marcus Jackson remained steadfast, meeting me weekly for coffee despite warnings from his superior officers about career-limiting friendships. His loyalty reminded me that true integrity attracted similar character. "They've got it wrong, sir," Marcus would say. "Anyone who's served under you knows you made the right call. This is politics, not military judgment." As weeks stretched into months, my apartment began reflecting my internal state. Dishes piled up, laundry went undone, and takeout containers accumulated on countertops. I started drinking alone, something I'd never done before. 2 drinks became 4, became a nightly routine to numb the sense of betrayal and injustice. Then came news that Grandpa Walter had suffered a severe stroke. My calls to the hospital were blocked by my parents, who instructed staff that I was not to be given information or allowed to visit. My only source of updates was a sympathetic nurse who occasionally texted brief reports from her personal phone. With my only ally incapacitated and my reputation in tatters, I seriously contemplated resignation. After 17 years of service, dedication, and sacrifice, perhaps it was time to admit defeat. I drafted the letter one night, after too many whiskeys, the words blurring through tears of frustration. What stopped me was an unexpected package. It contained dozens of letters from soldiers who had served under my command, expressing support and gratitude. Many credited my leadership with their survival in combat situations. One lieutenant wrote, "You showed us that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Please don't stop now." The package included a note from the doctor at the hospital in Kuranistan. "The 32 civilians in the Northern Wing returned to their families because of your decision. Whatever they say in Washington, you saved 32 worlds that day." Reluctantly, I made an appointment with the military psychologist, expecting platitudes and medication recommendations. Instead, Dr. Howard asked questions that forced me to articulate my core values. "Would you rather be respected for following orders that led to preventable deaths, or criticized for saving lives at professional cost?" she asked during one session. The answer was obvious when framed that way. I realized that while I had lost my family's approval, I had maintained my integrity. That distinction became my anchor in the months that followed. My 40th birthday passed without acknowledgement from family. No cards, no calls, not even a text message. I spent the evening alone, watching news reports about ongoing congressional investigations into my pattern of questionable judgment. I allowed myself one drink, then put the bottle away. Self-pity would not restore what I had lost. 6 months into my demotion and professional isolation, I received an unexpected visitor at my Pentagon office. Sophia Reyes, an investigative journalist with the Washington Post, requested 20 minutes of my time regarding inconsistencies in the Kuranistan operation narrative. Wary of media attention that had universally condemned me, I nearly declined. Something in her direct gaze convinced me to hear her out. "I've been investigating defense contracts related to Kuranistan operations," she began, placing a folder on my desk. "In the process, I discovered communications suggesting you were deliberately set up to fail." The folder contained copies of encrypted messages between General Victor Hayes, my former superior, and an intelligence officer I'd never met. The exchanges explicitly discussed withholding updated civilian presence information from my briefing package. "They knew there were still patients in that wing," I whispered. The confirmation of my suspicions, both vindicating and sickening. "Not only that," Sophia continued, "but General Hayes had financial interests in Precision Dynamic Systems, the defense contractor whose munitions would have been used in the strike you canceled." Over the following weeks, Sophia's investigation expanded with my guidance on where to look and what questions to ask. Then came a breakthrough. Technical Sergeant Amir Johnson from the Intelligence Division came forward as a whistleblower, providing documented evidence that my intelligence briefing had been deliberately sanitized of contradictory information. "I tried to include the thermal imaging inconsistencies in your brief, Colonel," Sergeant Johnson explained, "during our covert meeting in a Alexandria coffee shop. My superior removed those pages personally before transmission." With mounting evidence, the Department of Defense Inspector General launched a formal investigation. Classified servers were imaged, communication records subpoenaed, and sworn testimonies collected from dozens of personnel involved in the intelligence chain. The investigation uncovered something even more damning. Senator Blackwell, who had led the criticism against me, had received over $2 million in campaign contributions from defense contractors with direct financial interest in expanded operations in Kuranistan. The same contractors had hired my father as a strategic consultant 3 months before the incident. The second congressional hearing had a very different tone. Senator Elizabeth Morgan, chairing the reconvened Armed Services Committee, opened with an unprecedented statement. "We are here today to correct a grave injustice perpetrated against Colonel Emory Williams, whose judgment in the Kuranistan operation has been thoroughly vindicated by the Inspector General's report. This committee owes Colonel Williams an apology." The testimony that followed systematically dismantled the case against me. Evidence of deliberately falsified intelligence reports, financial conflicts of interest, and coordinated media manipulation painted a picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of military and political leadership. The Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a formal statement acknowledging that my decision to delay the strike had been correct based on the facts that should have been provided, demonstrating exceptional judgment under pressure. 2 days later, the Secretary of Defense personally visited my office. "On behalf of the United States military, I extend our sincere apology for the injustice you've endured, Colonel Williams," he said, handing me official documentation. "Your rank is fully restored, with back pay and appropriate compensation. Additionally, in recognition of your exceptional judgment and moral courage, you are being promoted to Brigadier General, effective immediately." Media coverage shifted overnight. Vindicated hero and general with conscience replaced insubordinate officer in headlines. Interview requests flooded my office, though I declined most, preferring to focus on rebuilding my career rather than my image. Despite the professional vindication, my family remained silent. I called my parents home repeatedly, each time reaching their secretary who promised they'll get back to you but never did. My sister's number had been changed. Letters I sent to both addresses were returned unopened, marked refused. When I visited the family home in Virginia, the housekeeper Margaret, who had known me since childhood, answered the door with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emory," she whispered. "They've instructed me not to allow you in. Your mother said to tell you they're not home. even when they are. I left a copy of the Inspector General's report and my promotion orders in an envelope. The next day, I found the envelope in my mailbox, unopened. My new assignment to the Pentagon's Strategic Planning Division placed me in direct reporting line to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a position of significant influence and visibility. My approach to humanitarian considerations in military planning gained traction, influencing operational doctrine in tangible ways. The only family communication came from Grandpa Walter, calling from his nursing home with a voice weakened by stroke but spirit unbowed. "I saw the news, my boy," he said, each word clearly requiring effort. "I knew you stood for something real, always have." 3 weeks after my promotion, I received the Distinguished Service Medal in a ceremony attended by senior military leadership and media representatives. The citation specifically mentioned moral courage in placing mission objectives and humanitarian considerations above political pressure. I reserved 3 seats in the front row. 3 seats remained conspicuously empty throughout the ceremony. That evening, I received a call from the White House. The president requested my presence the following morning. "General Williams," the president said as we sat in the Oval Office, "I wanted to personally apologize for the ordeal you've endured. Your actions represent the highest ideals of military service, placing both mission success and humanitarian principles above political expediency. Your country is grateful, even if that gratitude was unconscionably delayed." As my professional redemption continued, I used my new influence to ensure Captain Marcus Jackson received the promotion he deserved. His loyalty during my darkest period spoke to a character that deserved recognition. His promotion to major came through 3 months after my reinstatement. The final validation of my vindication came 8 months after the second hearing, when I received orders for promotion to Lieutenant General, 3 stars. At 37, I became one of the youngest 3-star generals in modern military history. My career acceleration, partly compensation for the unjust delay. As I stood before the mirror in full-dress uniform, the 3 stars on my shoulders represented not just rank but vindication. I had lost my family's approval, but I had maintained something infinitely more valuable, my integrity and the truth of who I was as a leader and a man. 2 years after my vindication and promotion, life had settled into a new normal. My position as strategic advisor at the Pentagon kept me busy with meaningful work that actually made a difference in how our military conducted operations. The Williams Doctrine of Civilian Protection Protocols was being taught at West Point as standard procedure. I discovered my sister Allison's engagement through the Washington Post Society pages one Sunday morning. Congressman Thomas Bradford announces engagement to Allison Williams, read the headline above a photo of them smiling at some Capitol Hill function. The article mentioned a spring wedding and highlighted both families' distinguished Washington connections. I sent a lavish bouquet of white roses, Allison's favorite since childhood, with a simple note, "Congratulations on your engagement. All my love, Emery." 3 days later, the flowers returned to my apartment with a delivery refused notice attached. Not ready to give up, I reached out to our cousin Jennifer, who had always maintained a neutral position in family conflicts. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe in Georgetown. "I'm sorry, Emery," Jennifer said, stirring her latte nervously. "They still don't discuss you. It's like you never existed." "But the whole world knows they were wrong," I said, struggling to keep frustration from my voice. "The congressional report, the media coverage, my promotion, how can they still pretend I did something wrong?" Jennifer shrugged uncomfortably. "Aunt Diane has convinced herself that you embarrassed the family deliberately. Uncle James says admitting they were wrong would be admitting they made a terrible mistake, and you know he never makes mistakes." She attempted a smile at this weak joke. "So the wedding?" I prompted when she fell silent. "When is it?" Jennifer's discomfort visibly increased. "June 15th at the National Cathedral. They're planning everything now. 300 guests, reception at the Willard, 6 bridesmaids." She trailed off, clearly reluctant to share these details with someone who wouldn't be invited. A week later, I saw Facebook photos posted by a mutual friend showing my mother hosting a wedding planning tea with Allison and her future in-laws. My mother looked radiant in her element, organizing a social event that would enhance the family's standing. Allison looked happy but somehow tense around the eyes, a tension I recognized from our childhood when trying to meet impossible expectations. Through a military colleague whose wife had received an invitation, I learned more details about the wedding plan. The ceremony would indeed be at the National Cathedral, with a reception following at the historic Willard Hotel. The guest list included 4 senators, 2 Supreme Court justices, and numerous military officers who had served with my father. I had Jennifer confirm what I already suspected. My name had been specifically removed from the guest list after a family discussion. "Your father told Aunt Susan that they only have 1 child now," Jennifer reported during our second coffee meeting, her eyes fixed on her cup rather than meeting mine. "I'm sorry, Emery. It's so wrong." The final blow came 2 months before the wedding. Grandfather Walter, who had been slowly recovering from his stroke, suffered a massive heart attack and died in his sleep. I learned about his death, not from family, but from scanning the obituary section of the newspaper 3 days after his funeral. The obituary read, "General Walter Williams, Ret., decorated veteran of Korea and Vietnam, passed peacefully on April 3rd. He is survived by his son James Williams, Colonel Ret., granddaughter Allison Williams Bradford, and his beloved dog Scout." No mention of his grandson, the Lieutenant General. I had been erased not just from the present but from family history itself. Through his lawyer, I discovered that grandfather had left me his medals and service journals in his will, a detail my parents couldn't legally override. When I collected these items from the attorney's office, I spent the evening reading his final journal entries. Spoke with James about Emery again. He had written in shaky handwriting, "Cannot understand this stubbornness. The boy was right. The evidence proves it. To reject your son for having integrity is the highest form of disgrace. Not sure I recognize my own son anymore." The grief of losing my only ally, combined with being excluded from his funeral, drove me to seek professional help. The military counselor helped me process both the loss and the rejection. "You're grieving 2 things," Dr. Patterson explained. "Your grandfather's death and the death of your hope for family reconciliation." "Should I attend the wedding uninvited?" I asked during one session. "Would that be disrespectful?" "The question is, what would be your purpose in going? Reconciliation? Recognition? Revenge? Your intention matters." I didn't have a clear answer. Marcus and his wife Helen had become my surrogate family during these years of estrangement. Over dinner at their home, I debated the ethics of attending uninvited. "Sometimes family needs to see who you've become," Helen said, as we sat in their living room long after dinner had ended. "Not for validation, but for closure. For you, not for them." Marcus, now a lieutenant colonel himself, added, "Whatever you decide, we've got your back." Despite having no expectation of attending, I found myself looking up Allison's wedding registry online. Among the crystal and silver, I recognized nothing of the sister I had known. On impulse, I sent an anonymous gift I knew would have meaning. A first edition of Tennyson's poems, similar to the volume I had given her for her 16th birthday, which she had treasured. The week before the wedding brought unexpected news that temporarily pushed family matters from my mind. I received orders for promotion to full general, 4 stars, based on my work reforming military humanitarian protocols and strategic planning innovations. At 38, I would become one of the youngest 4-star generals in recent military history. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for 3 days before Allison's wedding. As the stars were pinned to my shoulders by the Joint Chiefs, I thought of grandfather Walter and how proud he would have been to see this moment. There was no congratulatory call from my parents, no acknowledgement from my sister. The milestone that should have been a family celebration became another marker of their absence. The morning of my promotion ceremony, I stood before the mirror in my apartment adjusting my uniform with methodical precision. Each medal, each ribbon, represented not just achievement but survival. I had come through fire, professionally and personally, and emerged not unscathed but unbroken. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of flashbulbs and handshakes. The weight of those 4 stars felt both heavier and lighter than I had imagined. In my speech, I acknowledged those who stand by their principles, even at personal cost. A statement that drew knowing applause from those familiar with my history. Media coverage was extensive. America's youngest 4-star general in modern era read the Washington Post headline. The accompanying profile mentioned my unconventional path and commitment to ethical military leadership at significant personal cost. The White House reception following the ceremony brought another uncomfortable moment when a journalist asked the president about my family's absence. "General Williams represents the best of American military leadership," the president replied smoothly. "His family should be extraordinarily proud." The pointed emphasis on should was not lost on anyone present. I returned to my apartment that evening to find it empty and quiet. The celebration with colleagues concluded. On impulse, I opened the closet where I kept old photographs, pulling out an album from childhood. There was 10-year-old me teaching 6-year-old Allison to ride a bike, my hands steady on the seat as she pedaled with determination. Another showed us building a snowman, her laughter visible even in the still image as I added a carrot nose. These memories triggered others. The time 16-year-old Allison had called from a party where kids were drinking, and I drove 30 miles at midnight to pick her up, no questions asked. The weekend I'd helped her move into her college dorm, carrying heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs while our parents attended a fundraising gala they deemed unmissable. I found a letter Allison had sent during my first deployment, her handwriting still containing elements of adolescent roundness. "You're the only one who ever really listens, Em. Dad hears words, but you hear feelings." I miss that. What had happened to that connection? When had approval from our parents become more important to her than our sibling bond? Had I made it impossible for her to maintain both? The wedding was now 3 days away. I took out a notepad and drew a line down the center. On one side, I wrote reasons to attend, and on the other, reasons to stay away. Under reasons to attend, support Allison on important day. Show I still consider myself family. Opportunity for potential reconciliation. Demonstrate I've risen above rejection. Under reasons to stay away. Respect their clear wishes. Avoid creating scene that ruins Allison's day. Protect self from public rejection. Maintain dignity. The list provided no clarity. I called Marcus and Helen, who invited me over immediately. Their living room became a strategy session that lasted well past midnight. "They can't physically remove a 4-star general from a church," Marcus pointed out practically. "But should Emery have to force his presence where he's clearly unwanted?" Helen countered. "What would you regret more?" Marcus asked finally. "Going where you're unwelcome or missing your only sister's wedding?" The next morning, I visited an exclusive bookstore in Georgetown and purchased a meaningful wedding gift, a rare first edition of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poetry that Allison had once mentioned loving in college. I wrote a note to accompany it. "Allison, I have no intention of disrupting your special day. I simply want to support your happiness, as I've tried to do since you were born. Whatever has happened between me and our parents, you remain my sister. With love always, Emery." I arranged for the gift to be delivered to her apartment rather than bringing it to the wedding, eliminating any awkwardness about accepting it in front of our parents. The day before the wedding, I had my full dress uniform meticulously prepared by the military valet service. Each medal was polished, each seam perfect, the 4 stars gleaming on the epaulets. If I was going to face my family's rejection, I would do so representing not just myself, but the institution that had recognized my integrity when my family could not. That night, I dreamed of walking down the cathedral aisle while guests turned to stare and whisper. In the dream, my father stood and publicly denounced me, while my mother turned her back. I woke at 4 in the morning, sweating and uncertain. As dawn broke over the Potomac, I sat in my living room holding Grandfather Walter's service revolver, turning it over in my hands. Not contemplating anything drastic, but seeking connection to the one person who had always believed in me. What would Walter do? I asked the empty room. The answer came with surprising clarity. He would stand tall, act with dignity, and be true to himself, regardless of others' reactions. The decision crystallized. I would attend my sister's wedding not to create drama or force reconciliation, but simply to be present for a sibling I still loved despite everything. I would sit quietly in the back, offer congratulations if appropriate, and leave without confrontation if my presence caused distress. I called Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, my driver, to arrange transportation to the National Cathedral for that afternoon. Then I finished dressing with deliberate care, placing Grandfather Walter's watch in my pocket as a talisman of courage. "Ready, General?" Rodriguez asked when he arrived at my apartment. "As I'll ever be, Sergeant," I replied, straightening my shoulders under the weight of those 4 stars. Whatever happened at the cathedral, I would face it with the dignity my grandfather had taught me. The National Cathedral loomed magnificent against the June sky as my car pulled up to the entrance. Wedding guests in summer finery climbed the steps, greeting each other with the easy familiarity of shared social circles. Many were recognizable from news coverage: senators, judges, military brass, and Washington elite. Heads turned as I emerged from the car in full dress uniform, the 4 stars on my shoulders impossible to miss. Whispers spread through the gathering crowd. I heard fragments. "William's son and wasn't invited and scandal a few years back." I nodded politely to those I recognized, but proceeded directly to the cathedral entrance where a young man with a tablet checked names against the guest list. "Name, sir?" he asked without looking up. "General Emory Williams," I replied calmly. He scanned the tablet, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry, General. I don't see your name on our list. I'm the bride's brother," I explained quietly, maintaining a pleasant expression for onlookers. Before the young man could respond, my mother's brother, Uncle Philip, appeared at his shoulder, his face flushed with either heat or anger. "There's been a mistake," he said to the attendant, not acknowledging me directly. "General Williams is not on the approved guest list. Family request." I met my uncle's gaze directly. "Hello, Uncle Philip. It's been a long time." He looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. "Emory, your parents have been very clear about this. Please don't make a scene." Before I could respond, Senator Harrison and his wife approached, recognizing me immediately. "General Williams," the senator exclaimed, extending his hand. "An honor to see you, sir. Your work on the new ROE protocols has been revolutionary." Several other congressional colleagues of Thomas, Allison's groom, noticed the exchange and came over. Military training kicked in as they automatically rendered salutes, creating an awkward situation for my uncle. "Will you be sitting with the family, General?" Senator Harrison's wife asked innocently. Uncle Philip cleared his throat. "There's been a seating miscommunication. The general was just leaving." "Actually," I said quietly but firmly, "I'm here to support my sister on her wedding day. I'll take a seat in the back row to avoid any disruption." The gathering crowd of well-wishers made it impossible for Uncle Philip to continue his objection without creating exactly the scene he claimed to want to avoid. With a tight nod, he retreated, undoubtedly to warn my parents. I entered the cathedral and selected a seat in the last row, far from the family section. The soaring space filled with music as guests continued to arrive. I kept my posture straight but relaxed, determined to project dignity rather than defiance. Across the vast space, I caught my first glimpse of my father in 3 years. He stood tall in his dress blues, retired colonel's eagles gleaming on his shoulders, greeting guests with practiced charm. His face froze momentarily when someone whispered in his ear, his eyes scanning the crowd until they locked with mine. Shock transformed quickly to anger, his jaw tightening in a familiar expression. My mother, resplendent in mother of the bride finery, continued smiling and chatting with guests while frantically whispering to her social circle. Several women turned to stare in my direction, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and scandal-induced excitement. A young woman in a sleek pantsuit approached my pew, wedding planner clipboard in hand. "General Williams," she said quietly, "the family has requested that you exit before the ceremony begins." I met her gaze calmly. "I understand their feelings, but I'll cause no scene. This is about my sister's happiness, not family disputes. I'll remain quietly in this back row." "Sir, I've been instructed to insist," she continued, clearly uncomfortable. "Are you prepared to physically remove a 4-star general from a public church?" I asked softly. "Consider how that would appear to the gathered dignitaries and press. I suggest that allowing me to remain quietly here would create far less disruption than attempting to remove me." Her professional assessment of the situation visibly shifted. With a slight nod, she retreated, leaving me in place as the organist began the processional music. The ceremony began with groomsmen and bridesmaids proceeding down the aisle. Then came the moment every guest awaited. Allison appeared at the entrance on our father's arm, radiant in white lace. A collective murmur of appreciation rose from the gathering. As they proceeded down the aisle, Allison's eyes scanned the crowd in the way brides do, taking in the gathered witnesses to her happiness. Her gaze found mine unexpectedly. I saw the shock register, her step faltering slightly before our father steadied her with a firm grip. In that brief moment of eye contact, I saw not anger but something more complex. The ceremony proceeded with traditional elegance. I remained perfectly still, focusing on the joy evident in my sister's face as she spoke her vows. Whatever had passed between us, her happiness in this moment was genuine, and I was glad to witness it even from a distance. After the final blessing, the newly married couple processed back down the aisle. As they passed my row, Thomas, her new husband, actually nodded slightly in my direction, a gesture Allison seemed to notice with surprise. The question of the receiving line loomed as guests began exiting. Protocol dictated that guests greet the wedding party, but my presence was clearly unwelcome by at least 2 members of that party. I considered slipping out a side exit to avoid confrontation. No. I had come this far with dignity. I would complete this gesture properly. Taking my place at the end of the line, I steadily advanced toward the wedding party, watching my parents' growing awareness of my approach. When only 3 guests separated us, I saw my mother frantically adjusting her corsage, while my father suddenly became absorbed in straightening his already perfect tie. Their strategy was clear. Avoid acknowledgement entirely. I reached the groom first. To my surprise, Thomas extended his hand with genuine warmth. "General Williams, I've wanted to meet you. Your work on humanitarian protocols has been a major influence on my legislative priorities." "Congratulations, Congressman Bradford," I replied, shaking his hand. "I wish you both every happiness." Then I stood before Allison. 3 years of silence stretched between us. Her eyes searched mine, tears threatening her careful makeup. "You came," she whispered, then surprised everyone by stepping forward to embrace me briefly. "Thank you for coming, Emery." The moment was brief but real, a crack in the wall of family rejection. Then I stood before my parents, the final test of this difficult day. My father straightened to his full height, though he still stood an inch shorter than me. "This is a private family event," he said, voice low and controlled. "I am still family, whether acknowledged or not," I replied evenly. "I came to support Allison, not to seek reconciliation or create conflict." My mother glanced frantically around at nearby guests who were watching the interaction with undisguised interest. She subtly signaled to a security officer positioned nearby, maintaining her social smile with practiced skill. Before the situation could escalate, Thomas's mother, Federal Judge Eleanor Bradford, stepped forward from where she had been observing. "General Williams," she said in the authoritative tone that had become legendary in appellate courts, "please join our table at the reception. Any friend of my new daughter-in-law is welcome, but her brother especially so." The strategic brilliance of this intervention wasn't lost on anyone present. As mother of the groom, Judge Bradford had equal claim to hosting privileges. By specifically invoking my military rank rather than family relationship, she had shifted the dynamic from family rejection to professional respect. My father made one final attempt. "Eleanor, with all due respect, he's not welcome here." Judge Bradford raised one elegant eyebrow. "A 4-star general is welcome at my son's wedding table, James. I'm sure the other guests would agree." Her tone made clear this was not actually open for debate. The entire reception seemed to hold its breath as I walked across the cathedral hall to join Judge Bradford, her firm hand on my elbow making clear her support. My mother's social circle watched with undisguised fascination. Senior military officers present rendered subtle nods of respect as I passed. At the reception entrance, the photographer was arranging family for formal portraits. My parents attempted to position themselves to exclude me from the grouping. "Allison," the photographer called, "where would you like your brother to stand?" Before my father could interject, Allison spoke with quiet firmness. I hadn't heard from her since childhood. "My brother will be in the picture. Here, beside me." In that moment, standing beside my sister in her wedding gown, with our parents radiating cold fury on her other side, I realized that true courage sometimes comes in quiet moments of claiming connection rather than dramatic gestures of defiance. The camera captured a family divided by pride but momentarily united by obligation. 4 stars on my shoulders gleaming under the reception lights, impossible to deny. The reception dinner unfolded with elaborate elegance at the historic Willard Hotel. I found myself seated at a table with Judge Bradford and several members of Thomas's family, positioned just far enough from my parents' table to avoid direct interaction but close enough for Allison to visit easily. "Your parents are exactly as Thomas described them," Judge Bradford commented quietly, as we were served the first course. "Impressive credentials, impeccable manners, and absolutely rigid in their judgments. They have high standards," I replied diplomatically. "Standards should elevate those around us, not eliminate them," she observed with the incisiveness that had made her famous in legal circles. "I followed your career with interest, General. Your grandfather would be proud." The mention of Grandfather Walter from this unexpected source caught me off guard. "You knew him? We served on several veteran support committees together before his stroke. He spoke of you often, always with tremendous pride." Throughout dinner, I noticed Allison glancing in my direction between conversations with guests. During a brief lull in the festivities, she made her way to our table. "Would you walk with me a moment?" she asked, gesturing toward the terrace doors. We stepped outside into the warm June evening, the Washington Monument visible in the distance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I wanted to invite you," she finally said, her voice catching. "I've missed you, Emery. But they were so adamant, and I just couldn't." "You were caught in the middle." "I understand," I replied gently. "Do you?" Her eyes searched mine. "Because I don't. I don't understand how they can still refuse to acknowledge everything that happened. The congressional investigation, your promotion, everything proved you were right." "Being right was never what they valued most," I said. "Loyalty to family narrative has always outweighed truth." I reached into my pocket and withdrew a small wrapped package. "I brought something for you." She unwrapped the poetry book carefully, recognition dawning as she saw the title, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. "I used to read this in college when everything felt overwhelming. I remember. You called me from Georgetown one night, reading sonnets because you were stressed about finals. You remembered that?" She looked genuinely surprised. "I remember everything about being your brother, Ollie. That doesn't change, even when circumstances do." She brushed away, tears threatening to fall. "I've followed everything in the press. Your promotion, your policy work. I've been so proud, even though I couldn't say it." "That means more than you know," I admitted. We were interrupted by Thomas joining us on the terrace. "Sorry to intrude, but I wanted a moment with my new brother-in-law." He extended his hand with genuine warmth. "Congratulations on the 4th star. General, well deserved." "Thank you, Congressman." "Thomas, please," he corrected. "Actually, I've been seeking your advice through channels for months. Your perspective on humanitarian considerations in military engagement has been invaluable to my committee work." "You have?" Allison looked between us, confused. Thomas smiled sheepishly. "I may have arranged a few classified briefings, specifically to include the general's input. Military family connections can be useful that way." Before we could continue, the terrace door opened again. My father stood framed in the doorway, his posture military straight as always. For a moment, he simply observed us, then slowly walked forward. Allison tensed beside me. "Dad, please don't make a scene. I'm not here for that," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He turned to face me directly. "Congratulations on your promotion, General. 4 stars at 38 is quite an achievement." The formal acknowledgement of my rank, rather than my name, created an odd distance even in this moment of partial connection. "Thank you, sir," I replied, matching his formality. A heavy silence fell between us. Finally, he added, "Perhaps things were handled poorly. In the past." From my father, this oblique reference was as close to an apology as I was likely to receive. Not admission of wrongdoing, but acknowledgement that different choices could have been made. "Perhaps they were," I agreed, offering this small bridge. My mother appeared in the doorway, clearly reluctant to join, but unwilling to allow this interaction to continue without her supervision. She approached with practiced social grace, air kissing near Allison's cheek. "The band is asking about your first dance, darling," she said to Allison before briefly turning to me. "Emery, "Your uniform looks well fitted." This trivial comment, devoid of acknowledgement of either my rank or the years of separation, demonstrated that while my father might bend slightly, my mother remained entrenched in her position. "Thank you, Mother. Congratulations on orchestrating such an elegant event." She nodded stiffly, then produced a small box from her clutch. "I've had a piece of cake set aside, for you to take, if you wish." The awkwardly extended peace offering revealed her fundamental inability to simply apologize or admit fault. Yet, it represented more connection than I had received in 3 years. "I appreciate that," I said, accepting the box. Sensing we had reached the limit of this tentative reconnection, I decided to make a graceful exit rather than push for more than they could give. "I should leave you to enjoy your celebration. I've extended my congratulations, which was my purpose in coming." "Wait," Allison said quickly. "Can we have coffee next week? Just the two of us?" I nodded. "I'd like that very much." "I'll text you," she said, then deliberately took her phone and entered my number while our parents watched, a small act of independence that didn't go unnoticed. I shook Thomas's hand again, nodded to my parents, and kissed Allison's cheek. Then I walked through the reception with head held high, acknowledging salutes from military guests as I departed. 2 weeks later, Allison and I met at a small cafe in Georgetown, far from both our parents' home and my Pentagon office. The conversation began awkwardly, but gradually found its rhythm as we reconnected over memories and cautiously shared details of our current lives. "I'd like to try," she said as we prepared to leave, "to rebuild. Not like before, but something new." "I'd like that too," I replied. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. Allison texted regularly, sharing mundane details of her life that slowly rebuilt our connection. She never mentioned our parents, and I didn't ask. 3 months after the wedding, Allison and Thomas invited me to dinner at their new Capitol Hill home. Just the 3 of us, without the weight of extended family judgment. We laughed over Thomas's attempts at cooking and Allison's stories of congressional spouse politics. For the first time in years, I felt the simple pleasure of family connection without performance or judgment. The thaw with my parents progressed more slowly. My father called after the Washington Post ran a profile on my career, a stiff conversation that nonetheless represented progress. My mother sent a Christmas card with a formal note, but no personal message. Small steps, neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, but acknowledgement of my continued existence. In my Pentagon office, I created a small display that included the wedding photo showing Allison and me side by side, alongside Grandfather Walter's medals, a reminder of both what was lost and what remained. 1 year after the wedding, I received a Military Achievement Award at a public ceremony. Allison attended, sitting proudly in the front row. My parents declined the invitation I had sent more out of obligation than expectation. Over time, I've come to understand the difference between conditional and unconditional love. My parents offered the former, requiring compliance with their expectations to maintain connection. True family, I've discovered, can be created rather than simply inherited. Marcus and Helen, my loyal friends through the darkest times, Sophia, the journalist who helped uncover the truth, and even Judge Bradford, who has become an unexpected mentor, all demonstrate the family we choose can sometimes sustain us better than the family we're born into. The healing process continues, imperfect and nonlinear. I've learned to accept my parents' limitations without requiring them to become different people. I maintain self-respect while leaving room for whatever connection they can manage. As Grandfather Walter wrote in his final journal, "Character outlasts approval," those words guide me still, reminding me that standing in my truth matters more than standing in my family's good graces. Last Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner in my apartment. The table included Marcus and Helen, Sophia and her partner, 2 fellow officers without local family, and Allison and Thomas. My parents declined the invitation, but the absence didn't define the gathering. As I looked around that table, I realized that healing doesn't always require perfect resolution of past wounds. Sometimes it means creating something new from what remains, honoring the scars without being defined by them. So if you're facing family rejection or standing alone because you chose integrity over approval, know this: your worth isn't determined by those who cannot see it. Stand tall in your truth. The right people will recognize it, even if they aren't the people you originally hoped would. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and your own integrity? What helped you through that difficult time? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we create sustains us more than the family we're born into.